welcome back to our second segment, and I have the special pleasure and honor to to talk to Ms. Liz Hicley, a compliance officer from Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, known as MCAD. So please join us in the conversation, and again, you can call in because it's a live show at 617-708-3290. So Liz, welcome.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on our show.
Sure.
So talking about MCAD, or Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, could you tell people what is it all about?
Sure. Our agency's mission is to enforce anti-discrimination laws. Our main focus is employment discrimination, housing discrimination, and public places or public accommodation discrimination.
Yeah.
So it's our agency's mission to ensure that people in the workplace, in housing, are free from discrimination. And the way that we enforce our laws is actually by receiving complaints from the public. The public will come in and speak to us and let us know that they feel that they've been discriminated against, and we thereby investigate those complaints to see whether or not our laws have been violated.
I see. So what is your role at the MCAD?
Sure. So as you had mentioned, I'm a Compliance Officer 3, been with the agency for 7 years, and my role is actually a supervisory role. I oversee a unit of investigators. I make sure that they're appropriately handling their cases, and I also investigate a caseload of my own. So the role of an investigator is to conduct intake, which is meeting with the public to take their complaints. We also hold investigative conferences with the parties to gather information about the discrimination complaints. And we question witnesses, we talk to parties, we ask questions from lawyers representing employers, a whole gamut of people we speak to in order to gather information to figure out whether or not our laws have been violated along the way.
And usually, how do people know about you?
Generally, they come into our office. They might be referred by an attorney, a housing authority, a friend, family member. There's not really too much literature out there about the MCAD, but we are listed on the mass.gov website because we are the state law enforcement agency for discrimination.
I see. They're bilingual, well, not bilingual, they're people who English as a second language. Do you have any translation available for people?
We do. It is limited. We do have various investigators who do speak second and third languages. When we are unable to accommodate someone with an in-person translator, we do have a translation line in which we could still meet with the person there and call into this line to have translation services given to us.
I see. So what is the process for people to come forward and file a complaint?
Sure. So basically, if a person feels that they have been discriminated against, we define discrimination as feeling that you're treated differently or less favorably than somebody of a different protected category. And when I say protected category, I think we have a slide somewhere that lists the protected categories. This is race, national origin, age, religion, gender. Everybody belongs to a protected category. You can file under one or more of those categories if you feel that that is related to, being treated unfavorably. In order to file a complaint with the MCAD, you have to identify some sort of adverse action that's happened to you in employment. Maybe you were denied a promotion. Maybe you weren't hired for a job and you think that it's related to your race or your gender. As long as you can identify something that has happened within the last 300 days, we can go ahead and take that complaint for you and investigate it on your behalf.
I see. So I'm just curious, what is the average length of of the case that it closes? I know depending on the case.
Sure. On average, finding in a case takes approximately 18 months. It's quite a lengthy process, but it's due to the fact that there is a lot of information sharing back and forth between the parties. And a lot of times, people might have been employed for 15 years, and we have to go through a lot of documentation in order to figure out whether or not somebody has been subjected to discrimination.
So in what situation would people come forward, to you, you mentioned, oh, by the way, so I saw retaliation as one of the category as well. Could you talk about that? Because to me it's interesting too.
Of course, yeah, retaliation is an interesting protected class because the general term retaliation is kind of, this for that. You did something bad to me, I'm going to retaliate and do something bad back to you. But under our discrimination statute, in order to file a retaliation claim, you must show that you either engaged in speaking out against discriminatory practices by either filing a complaint internally with your company, claiming that you'd been discriminated against, and then your company thereby terminates you, and you feel that they've done that because you filed this discrimination complaint. Or you come to the MCAD, you file a complaint with us while you're still employed, the employer gets wind of that complaint and then retaliates against you by demoting you or changing your hours or doing something adverse against you. That's how you can be covered under retaliation. But other general examples of discrimination under our statute would be, I'm going to focus on employment because those are the bulk of our complaints. If we're talking about, say, a gender complaint, say I went for a job, I went for a promotion, and a male employee with similar qualifications received the promotion, but I felt that I was more qualified for the position. I may think, hey, I might have not received the promotion because I'm a female, and I would like to go to the MCAD and file a complaint, and then the MCAD will go ahead and look into past history of promotions and check the resumes of both myself and the male coworker to see if I was more qualified for the position. It's possible that there was a discriminatory bias towards females, something like that. I've seen other interesting cases where, like, age is one of our protected categories, like I said earlier. In order to be a part of that protected category, you need to be 40 or over.
I see.
So if there's been cases where, say, a 60-year-old person goes to a movie theater and they'd like to apply for a job there. And most of the staff at the theater is probably their 20s, their teens, and they don't even get called back for an interview. They might come and say, I think that they didn't even think about me, or they didn't even interview me because I'm an older individual. And again, that would be something that we can certainly look into. And if there's enough evidence to show that that occurred, then we'll have to take action.
So how many cases do you handle on average? A month, a year? Or?
So each investigator currently has a caseload of about 300 cases.
Wow.
And that's part of the reason why it's such a lengthy process. So it's difficult, but it's very interesting work, and it's something that I'm passionate about because it's really helping others. So how many people are there in your team? And you mentioned level 3, so there's the other 2 levels? Yeah, so a compliance officer 1 is an investigator. Compliance officer 2 has a little more supervisory authority. They may supervise interns or other lower level colleagues, whereas a CO3 or a compliance officer 3, which I am, is an actual supervisor. So I monitor the comings and goings of the investigators below me. I have 4 in my unit currently.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Well, and how many caseload do you have?
I have about 300 cases.
Wow,
as well.
300
yeah,
cases.
So
that's a lot of work to finish in a year. What's the?
In about 18 months.
18 months.
Yeah, we hope to close each case. Sometimes it could be less, sometimes it could be more, based, depending on, the information in the file.
So are these victims that you help basically looking for monetary compensation out of this, or is it justice, or could you share with us?
It can be all of the above. It really depends on the person, and the MCAD typically when we do find, that discrimination has occurred in a case, there's monetary and non-monetary damages. Monetary damages could include back pay, front pay, emotional distress damages. Non-monetary damages could include job reinstatement. Someone just has been out of work for a couple of months, they really want to come back. It was just a miscommunication, and we can orchestrate getting them back to their job. You could get the promotion that you had always wanted, stuff like that. And then there's also, we want to continue to attempt to prohibit discrimination in the Commonwealth, so we do offer mandatory trainings to employers who we have found liable for discrimination, because we want to make sure we get in there and teach them so that they're knowledgeable and that they don't break the laws in the future.
So are you proactive in going to major employer and give a presentation about the information?
We're getting there. We do have an outreach and training team, and so we do a lot of outreach, and we try to reach communities that aren't very knowledgeable about our agency. Again, we have limited resources as a state agency, but our main purview in regards to that is getting those employers that have been found to have violated discrimination laws to get in there and to make sure we follow up with those companies too, to make sure that they're not engaging in those practices again.
I see. So what have been some interesting case? I know you might not want to share details, but what do you remember most about that you feel good about your work in resolving?
All of the cases they're very interesting, and there's been a lot of cases where the employee didn't even necessarily receive a favorable finding at the end of the investigation, but they felt that they had been heard and their complaints had been voiced, and their company understood that there's something bad happened. It wasn't necessarily discriminatory, but they were able to kind of state their claims and get their words out there. But cases that I've felt were really, valuable have been cases where a disabled employee has received modifications to their work environment so that they're able to do their jobs just as well as a non-disabled person. Whereas without filing with the MCAD, the employer wasn't necessarily being responsive to that disabled employee's requests. So cases like that are really, they're valuable, and they really make the job definitely worthwhile.
Yeah, that's for sure. But what have been challenges for you, in trying to do your work?
Well, it's just so our statute, like I said, when I talked about the protected categories, in order to file a claim with us, you need to identify one of those protected categories, like your age, your gender, your race, to show this is why I feel I've been discriminated against. A lot of people come into our agency and they said, I got fired and I'm really upset and I don't know what to do. And we have to kind of tell them, we're very, very sorry to hear that. Let's I'll explain again exactly what we do and how we can try and help you. But if they can't identify one of those protected categories in which they feel they've been discriminated against in, we can't move forward with a case for them. So, and a lot of times there's people that are dealing with inappropriate or rude managers that just happen to be, mean to everybody. They don't necessarily discriminate, they're just mean to everybody. And it's hard to tell a person, unfortunately, that's not discrimination. And so there's really not that much we can do for that person. But we do encourage employees that have to deal with situations like that to definitely inform their human resources personnel or exhaust their internal complaint process in order to try and remedy those types of situations.
I see. So now, what if the outcome is not favorable, for the victim? Then is there an appeal process, or what's the next step?
Yeah. So at the conclusion of an investigation, the MCAD will come up with one of two findings. A probable cause finding says that it's more likely than not that discrimination occurred, and in that case it would go forward to a public hearing. At the public hearing, the judge would determine the settlement in that matter. If the case receives what's called a lack of probable cause finding, that would mean that there just wasn't enough, there wasn't sufficient evidence to show that discrimination occurred. that person that filed the complaint would receive a written report of the reasons why, and would also be given a 10-day appeal period where they could come in and they could explain, I think that something was missed. There's actually more information that came to light, and we can certainly, re-examine that information, and it's possible that it could be overturned and brought forward to a public hearing.
So who are the hearing officer if it gets to that stage?
We have 3 commissioners currently that hear those cases, and we also have hearing officers as well within our agency that hear the cases.
I see. Yeah. So talk about MCAD for a little bit. I assume that there's a board, right? Is there a board that decides the work of MCAD and whether it's
really like the state legislature that pretty much keeps us up to date on laws that are being passed that are within our jurisdiction. But I do want to just quickly talk about the complaint process. To file a complaint with our agency, if someone feels they're being discriminated against, they can come into one of our 4 offices in Massachusetts. We have Boston, Springfield, Worcester, and New Bedford. What happens is you come in and you meet with an intake specialist. The intake specialist would go over with you your situation, why you felt you've been discriminated against, and assist you in writing a narrative of your allegations of discrimination. That narrative then would be sent to the employer or public housing authority or whoever you're filing the complaint against, so that they have an opportunity to provide a defense to those allegations. During this whole process, you'd be assigned an investigator. The investigator's name and phone number would be afforded to the parties, so that you can contact them about the process. There's also, once you file a complaint with the MCAD, the parties are alerted about our mediation program. That's available at the start of every investigation and is available throughout the entire investigation. It's a free program offered by the MCAD for the parties to come in and discuss, negotiating a settlement of the claims. Meaning, sometimes an employer receives a complaint and thinks in their head, oh boy, we don't think that we discriminated against this person, but there's definitely been some miscommunication. We'd certainly like to speak with this individual, and maybe we can remedy the situation without going through this whole investigative process. So that mediation program is a huge benefit to the parties. It is voluntary, so both the parties have to agree to it, but it's free. The entire investigative process at the MCAD is free. So if they don't go to mediation at the beginning of the investigation, we get the employer's defense, and then at that point, the person filing the complaint has an opportunity to present any additional information they have to the investigator to show, these are the reasons why I feel I was discriminated against. If it's an employment case, they may be required to attend a conference with the investigator and both the parties of the claim, the person filing and the employer. At that conference, the investigator would gather information from the parties in order to thoroughly investigate. And then after that is the point where a finding is rendered in the matter.
I see. So how can people contact you, because we're running out of
time?
So
yeah. So like I said, we are on the mass.gov website. It's www.mass.gov/MCAD. And our main line in Boston is 617-994-6000. And like I said, you can come into any of our 4 offices in Boston, Worcester, Springfield, and New Bedford to file a complaint. And that number that I just said is also our information line if you just want some more general information about our agency.
Great, thank you so much.
Sure.
Because we're running out of time, and I hope you will come back again
Absolutely.
to talk about this. Just in case. Yeah. All right. Thank you for watching our program this evening. We look forward to having you back again at next week's Wednesday from 7 to 8. If you have any question or would you like to make any comments, please send it to VATV. The email is vatv@vatv.org, or you can call them at 617-822-3717. Thank you and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.